This week's edition of our Four Questions Journalist Spotlight is brought to you by Leff Atlanta Media, Atlanta's best journalist database. Subscribe at leffsatlantamedia.com. Welcome to the next edition of our Four Questions Journalist Spotlight. We are talking today with A.R. Shaw, who is a editor and writer with several publications in town, and we're going to kind of get into everything he's done. Good afternoon, A.R. Good to see you today.
Thanks for having me. It's you were telling me about this platform, and I'm excited to be on it.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad to have you. Yeah, you and I ran into each other. I'll give a plug. We ran into each other at the Boys and Girls Clubs of Metro Atlanta Top Golf fundraiser a couple of weeks ago. An organization that is near and dear to my heart. I've been volunteering there for about 30 years, and I just love what they do. And bgcma.org if you want to anybody wants to check it out and volunteer or make your donation. Okay, there's my nonprofit support plug for the day. Boys and Girls Club, great organization. All right, AR. So let's start with we're going to talk about the Atlanta Daily World and the Guardian, but let's start with Daily World and talk about what your role was there and kind of how long you've been there and what you've been doing there and that kind of thing, and then we'll kind of go over to the Guardian.
Okay, yeah. So for those who don't know, ADW is the first Black daily newspaper in America. Started in 1927 by the Scott family. The Scott family, they were pretty much a prominent family in Atlanta for decades, and a Morehouse grad. W.A. Scott, he founded Atlanta Daily World in 1927, and it was this was at a time when you didn't really have many newspapers dedicated to the Black community, and on a day-to-day basis eventually they set up a headquarters on Auburn Avenue, and of course Auburn Avenue is historic location, the street where Dr. Martin Luther King was born on. You have historic places like Atlanta Life. This is a historic street till this day, and so it's a lot of history behind Atlanta Daily World. The owners of it now reached out in like 2022, and they wanted to kind of revamp it and kind of bring things back to life. And I decided to say, this is something that's important to the city of Atlanta, and so I hopped on and we did a lot of great work. We did covered multiple Super Bowls, covered the Atlanta Hawks in Abu Dhabi. We covered multiple political races such as Senator Raphael Warnock and his historic race. So it was a lot of great coverage that we got an opportunity to do to just highlight the city, what's happening in the city of Atlanta, but also paying homage to a historic media outlet.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been doing PR in Atlanta for a long time, and the Daily World has always been there through the Scott family and then through the years. Always kind of a great history and legacy and reputation. So your title is executive editor, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And how many staffers, or how is the writing structured right now?
Well, it's owned by a larger company, RTM, which is based in Michigan. So there's multiple news outlets. They have the Michigan Chronicle, the Chicago Defender, also the Pittsburgh Courier. So there's multiple news outlets under the umbrella. In Atlanta, there's there's two main writers, and there's also a few freelancers and contributors. But there's also contributors in other cities as well. So that's kind of how the business structure is laid out.
Yeah, and the papers share some content between themselves, right?
Yeah. So they kind of
as is. Yeah, I'm sorry.
yeah, cross correlation. You're right.
Yeah. Well, and which makes perfect sense. If there are certain stories that are of interest to people in multiple cities, why write the
Yeah.
same story four times, right?
Oh,
So, just so folks know, who are the two? You said there. I think you said there were two main writers. Who are the two main writers for
oh
the
yeah,
paper?
Wise Edwards, who've been around in Atlanta for years. She's actually from Detroit, Michigan as well, but she moved down to Atlanta, I think in the early 2000s. Um, it was also another writer named Hunter Gilmore who did some stuff with Revolt TV. She was around, but then was also we had contributors that contributed as well within the city. So it was just those are like the main I guess writers that were on. They kind of created content during my years there.
Right. So so what makes a story an Atlanta Daily World story? Obviously, black focus, right? But is there something you look at it and you say, okay, this is a story that we want to write about, something we want to cover versus maybe something you would take from another outlet or something you would look and say, okay, this has been covered a lot. We don't need to cover this. What's kind of the theme or the overall umbrella of what you want to be known for in terms of the type
So
of coverage?
yeah, so for me, it was really about focusing on local, but I think Atlanta is so huge that a lot of Atlanta stories become national, and some of the major stories that were local that became national was, of course, the YSL trial, which was in Atlanta. Even the situation with District Attorney Fonnie Willis. That was a story that got a lot of national attention, but it was a local story. And you go to on the entertainment side, someone like an Usher going to the performing at the Super Bowl, and at the Super Bowl he's saying I bring the world to the A. So this is kind of how I looked at it in terms of how do we highlight Atlanta, the community, but then also show the global impact or just the international impact of this city. So that's pretty much how I looked at it.
Yeah, Usher is actually going to be, he's going to be doing the commencement, or by the time folks hear this, we'll have done the commencement speech at Emory for their graduation
Right.
this year. Yeah.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
I was trying to get breakfast with him, but apparently he was too busy or something. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe
You
next
know,
time.
his people are usually good about calling back, but they're busy. I guess they're busy this year, that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
So so you worked, I kind of remember you worked for Rolling Out quite a bit for a couple of years too, right?
Yeah, Rolling Out is actually where I got my start.
Yeah.
Rolling Out, I interned at Rolling Out during my college days, and then I worked for free. And then after college, which was great, was a week after I graduated, they offered me a full-time role. Which means I never had to go look for a job after graduation. I had a good opportunity to learn pretty much on the go. And what was different about Rolling Out is that most times, people who, journalism majors, most journalism majors will tell you that once they, if you go to a traditional newspaper, they put you on a beat, and then you kind of have to work that beat for a few years, and then you kind of expand. Um, but with Rolling Out, it was like everything was a beat. So you had to kind of swim or sink, and we did a lot of great work there. During my time there, we covered the Obama administration, pretty much his rise and going from Chicago to his announcement of running for president, the historical presidential run. I covered that. I covered him at the White House, so I did several articles at the stories based off of some events at the White House. We did a lot of international events as well. I covered the Olympics in London. I covered Jay-Z in Paris one year. We also did, one of the biggest things was our cover stories. And some of the cover stories that I produced included LeBron James, Serena Williams. I did a cover on Dwayne Wade. Um, and for the young people, I did a cover with Zendaya
Oh
before
yeah.
before she became the international superstar. I think it was actually one of her first national cover stories that we did with Zendaya, and it was a major look. So we were able to do a lot with little, but yeah, Rolling Out magazine was where I got my start, and it pretty much allowed me to do a lot, at a rapid pace.
Yeah, that magazine always seems to get a lot of great gets, as they say. There's a lot of great covers and a lot of great folks who are profiled and interviewed for that magazine. But that's not you. That's somebody else. Let's talk about you. Let's get back to you.
Yeah.
Um, so I know you also do work for the Guardian. So let's talk to me about what does that entail?
Yeah, so I connected with the Guardian maybe shortly around early 2022. They so they were looking. Well, I was connected to someone who was working there, and then um they basically just reached out to me and asked me to pitch some stories if I had any ideas regarding sports. And I pitched the story on the first story that I pitched was the athletes who escaped Ukraine right before the Russian invasion. So I pretty much had to go and find some of the athletes who were playing playing basketball overseas, and just talk about their story of like basically you have to leave in 24 hours. You have to get everything that you have and leave immediately, right? And so yeah, it was almost like like that it was like a story of your life changing in a matter of hours. And
Hours or minutes, right?
yeah, yeah. So it was, so I got an opportunity. That was actually my first story. I also did stories on Brittany Griner's, when she was held captive in Russia for during that time period. I did
Right.
multiple stories on her. I also did stories like the NFL draft preview. I recently did a NBA playoff prediction story that ran, I think like last week, right before the NBA playoffs started. So I wrote a piece on that. And I also wrote a piece on this guy named Max Shulga, who's a basketball player for Virginia Commonwealth University, and he was from Ukraine, and he talked about basically, playing ball at a high level. He was actually the A-10 player of the year. And then, he talked about, his family that's still in Ukraine, and he hasn't seen his family in years. So a lot of the stories with the Guardian, they kind of have like an international slant to it.
Are they going to have you doing some World Cup with all that coming to Atlanta next year?
It's possible. It's possible. Yeah,
I
it's
think
possible. It's like, yeah,
that's going to be that's going to be big. They say it's like 8 Super Bowls coming to Atlanta
oh,
within a month, right?
oh yeah, it's gonna be huge, and it's two things. You're either gonna be in it or you need to get away. So figure out which side you're gonna go. Choose a side.
I think there's going to be a lot of fun things happening around town. So if you don't want to go to the stadium to watch the game, or you don't want to spend the money for that, there's going to be watch parties. I know Decatur just announced they're doing a whole series of viewing and watch parties next summer, and there probably will be some other cities that pop up that say, hey, we want to do something too, and I'm
Yep.
sure that obviously the city of Atlanta is going to do some kind of fan fest kind of things downtown. And the Chamber of Commerce and ACB, the Chamber Convention Bureau are always these are always kind of big things for them. So they tend to
Yeah.
kind of encourage people to do that kind of thing. Uh, so for the daily world, for example, are there some stories or themes or topics that you're kind of following, thinking I want to write about this over the next couple of months, either issues or stories that are kind of on the back burner, thinking we got to cover that?
I mean, the biggest thing I think, preparation for the World Cup is big. I think a lot of things that's happening right now with the city and how things are being structured ahead of time. Recently, Airbnb they did a thing at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium where they're prepping individuals who have homes in Atlanta about renting their homes out for the week.
Yeah.
And that's another aspect that you have to look at in terms of how can the citizens in some way capitalize off of this moment, and what are some of the benefits for the citizens, uh, because it's gonna like you're right, it's a multi-billion-dollar uh, international game, so it's like how can the citizens of Atlanta benefit?
Right. I think we have 8 matches in Atlanta, and then I want to say there's matches in Miami, I think. I can't remember where the other matches are off the top of my head.
Yeah,
But yeah, great opportunity, and we have about 400 days to figure it out, right?
yeah, yeah, around the corner.
All right, so let's jump to the what is often the hardest question of these little spotlights is what is the coolest thing about A.R. Shaw that people might not know about?
that they might not know. Well, all right, so I think this is cool. It might be a little nerdy, but I think it's cool. So my first interview, well, my first article ever, the first article that I ever did was in fourth grade. And my fourth grade teacher, she basically made me a candidate to be a part of the school newspaper. At this time, journalism is probably the furthest thing from my mind. But I guess she saw, that I could write pretty well, and she put me on the newspaper staff. And my first article that I ever produced, the first article that I ever wrote was on Two Live Crew. Now, as a fourth grader, I guess the average fourth grader probably shouldn't be listening to Two Live Crew. And I didn't listen. I didn't know much about Two Live Crew, but I had a lot of older siblings and older people that lived in my community, and I would you would see it, right? And so, but what was interesting about Two Live Crew at that time is that they were going through an obscenity trial, and you remember this. This was a First Amendment case about freedom of speech and obscenity on records.
Yep.
And this is the reason why you have the parental advisory sticker on all albums, is because of the Two Live Crew and that obscenity case that they had. So I think that, that was, like I said, that was the first article that I wrote about. I did my research on pretty much Two Live Crew, on that First Amendment, freedom of speech, and how it connected to hip hop and rap at that time.
Right.
So yeah, like I said, that's a fourth grader. So that's kind of, yeah. So that was my first.
Did that set you on the path, or was that kind of a bump, and then the journalism really came later, or was that kind of?
It was a bump. It was a bump
okay.
because it was a bump, and then like years later, in college, that's when I picked it back up. A friend, when I was in college at Georgia State University, she wrote for she was the editor of the school paper, and she needed content, and she came to me one day and she said, do you have anything you want to write about? I just need to, make this paper, right?
Sure.
So she just came to me, open hands. It's like, I was like, okay. And I attended a concert with Nas. He came to Atlanta that year, and then she said, okay, you could write a review on that concert. So I wrote the review. It got a lot of attention. She told me, she said, your article got a lot of attention. You should consider, doing more writing. And so at that moment, that was the exact moment that I changed my major, because I was initially a business administration major, and I changed my major to journalism. And so
That's great.
Yeah,
That's great.
I
had when I was in high school, we had a high school paper, and I had some friends who were pretty active in it, and I never really got into it in high school, but when I got to college and I went to Emory, and I had some friends who were like, "Oh, you're working on this event. Write us an article for the paper about this event, or for the yearbook or something." So, I was like, okay, I can start kind of writing feature articles, and just kind of figuring out as it went. I was a business major, as you were initially. I wasn't a journalism major, so, but I guess I'd like to write, and then kind of went from there and started writing more for the different magazines at the university and the school paper more. So yeah, it is fun how you sometimes you just kind of fall into things unintended, right? Like you don't necessarily plan on, and that kind of drives your life in a certain way, and in a way that you might really not have planned or realized initially. It just kind of like you kind of fall into it, and you think, okay, I like doing this. Maybe I'll keep doing this.
Oh yeah.
And now you're a couple years later, and you're still doing it. So
Still doing it.
there you go. There you go. All right. So these next couple of questions are kind of a little bit of a lightning round. We don't need to do long
Yeah.
answers, but I'm going to ask you kind of some fun things about A.R. Shaw, and you tell me a little bit. So first one is, I'll give you an option, either the last book you've read or the last podcast you've listened to, and we'll give a little plug for the podcast in the show notes, as they say.
Okay, so I'm gonna do both. So the last book that I read, I'm rereading Freakonomics, a book that came out years ago.
That's a great one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm rereading
Great
that.
book.
And then there's a podcast. it's little known. They don't really have many subscribers or followers, but it's a lot of great information. It's a guy by the name of, I think his name is Simon Owen, and he has a podcast called The Business of Journalism, and it just talks about the business aspects of journalism. And it's a very informative podcast, and he doesn't really get many views, but I watch all of the episodes. So for me, it's like I
Uh,
support it.
yeah, well, you know, as I say, you're learning something from it, so that's
Yeah.
probably doesn't matter to you how many other people are reading it. You're getting the secrets to yourself, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's all right. All right, what's your favorite local restaurant?
Favorite local restaurant is Virgil's Gullah Kitchen. It's a restaurant that basically features food from Savannah, the coast of Savannah. So if you know about Gullah,
Yeah, yeah.
that culture, and so it's a lot of seafood, a lot of spices that you would get from that culture. So to me, it kind of connects Savannah to Atlanta. So that's to me, I think that's probably like my top restaurant right now.
So that sounds interesting. Where's that one located?
So they initially had two. The first one was on Main Street, in College Park. I think they closed that one down, and now there's one on Marietta Street, in West Midtown. So it's
Okay.
like, yeah, it's like,
Yeah. And
um,
I know where you're thinking. Kind of like a little bit maybe near the aquarium, a little bit
well,
north of the aquarium.
it's kind of west. So think of, like, if you think of like near the Georgia Tech campus,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah, I
right
got
in
yeah,
that
yeah.
area of
Okay.
West Midtown.
Do you remember Thelma's Kitchen?
Yep.
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 Back in the day, they were there on over by Georgia Tech there. I
Yep.
love that place.
Yep.
Love that place.
Yep.
I first started going there where she was in Centennial Olympic Park on Lucky Street,
Yep.
and
I
when they rebuilt Centennial Park for the Olympics, she moved north, and she still had a pretty good following, but it wasn't quite the
Yeah.
same ambiance. It was bigger and not as much of a hole in the wall kind of place. All right, what's your favorite guilty pleasure?
Favorite guilty pleasure. Let's see. I think hmm, I like silly podcasts. Podcasts that's really about nothing, and it's people just sitting around talking about foolishness. Um, yeah, and because it just, I think because with journalism we're so structured in a lot of ways that sometimes we don't really get the freedom to like say a lot of foolishness. So I think for me it's just really to kind of peep into those conversations that are really about nothing. So I was
Is
sit there.
is there an example? Is there one of those that you really like?
Um, what is the Joe Budden podcast?
Yeah,
I think and it's really a podcast about nothing. And I think they just sit there and just talk. It's kind of like
so,
barbershop talk. Like,
yeah. Sometimes that's more interesting.
yeah, it's just
It's just interesting conversation, and the conversation just evolves and goes one way, and you never quite know where it's going to go because somebody else walks into the conversation and says, "Hey, what about that? What about this?"
yeah,
And
yeah.
you go a
That's
different.
that's
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So, favorite local getaway? Someplace could be Georgia, could be somewhere else. Place you like to go.
Places I like to go, anywhere where there's water because we don't have much water in Atlanta. So I like to go. I like to find lakes. In Cascade, there's like a preserve on Cascade where there's like it's like a creek, and it's like a walking path, very obscure. You would probably have to know that it's there to to know that it's there.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so any place in Atlanta that has any water because we just lack water. And so I think that's kind of like I try to get away, look at us like whether there's like small waterfalls or small creeks. For me, that's kind of a good getaway.
Okay. And the last one is, what's your favorite non-work hobby?
Favorite non-work hobbies, probably uh traveling. Although I travel a lot for work, I think traveling is something that I just love in terms of just being able to experience different cities or countries. Traveling is probably the best non-work activity. Although I usually when I travel, I find work. I find a way to
Find a way to work.
tell some type of story. 'Cause yeah, it's just I feel like there's a story everywhere. But yeah, traveling is probably
That's
probably
see, and I think that's a good way to kind of end our conversation. There's a story everywhere. That
yeah.
that could be above your door. There's a story everywhere. I like that. I'm going to steal that, but I'm going to attribute it to you. A.R.
Okay.
Shaw said, "There's a story everywhere." I do like
Yeah.
that. I really like
Yeah.
that. All right, we've been talking with A.R. Shaw, who is the executive editor of the Atlanta Daily World and also a writer for the Guardian newspaper. Uh, I'm going to put your different websites in the show notes so people can find your work and find the Daily World and your work at the Guardian, and we'll tag on all your social media so people can find all that way. Uh, Thank you to A.R. Shaw for taking the time to speak with us today. We really appreciate it. All right, thank you, folks. As always, you can find our database or library of journalist spotlights on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you find audio podcasts. And as always, look for our Leff Atlanta Media database if you're trying to find journalists in Atlanta. And check out the Atlanta Press Club. It's always have great events coming up for journalists, and the Society of Professional Journalists Georgia chapter is also good too. I always like to give them some love. And for the Four Questions Journalist Spotlight, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, AR.
All right, good stuff. Thanks for having me, Mitch.